Hey guys, Travis with TechRaptor back at Gen Con 2017. We're taking a look at a demo of Twilight of the Gods. We're here with the game's designer, Chris. He's going to run us through it.
All right.
Take it away.
First, basic mechanics of the game. Your deck is your life. It's called your life stack. As you take damage, cards will start flipping out into your discard stack. Other players, or the person you're playing against, can choose to attack either your life or your discard stack. If they attack your discard stack, it will remove cards permanently from the game. So essentially, you have your current life and your max life. Different decks do different things with the discard stacks. There's lots of ways to restore cards back underneath your life stack, so sometimes you might want to attack the discard stack to remove their permanent life. There are 4 different types of cards in this game. First, however, we'll talk about the resources of the game. The back of each card tells you what resource that card is worth. So we have Tier 1, we have Tier 2, we have Tier 3. As the tier levels go up, the power level of the card also goes up. On the front of the card, you will see basic anatomy. In the upper left is the summoning cost of the card. That tells you how many resources of that specific type you need to summon the card. In the upper right, it tells you the tier level of the card. So that way you don't have to keep referencing the back of the card to know what it is. You can just stare at the front. You have your artwork in the middle. Below that is the name of the card. On this right-hand upper side, it tells you what type of card it is. I'll get into that in just a second. This white box is the text box, tells you what the card does while it's in the field of play or being played. This black box at the bottom is the heresy box. So that's the one you want to pay attention to when you're trading cards. Because when I trade this to you as a resource, if later on I manifest this, which means you turn it face up, we're then going to resolve whatever that heresy effect is. So that's the trap that is on the card. So when I have my hand and I'm looking to trade cards, we're looking to trade cards with each other, I also want to be looking at these heresy effects and deciding, okay, I really want to trade this to you because I have an intention of manifesting it later. Now, certain decks don't rely as much on manifesting, so if you really don't want to have to pay attention to that, you don't have to. But for those players who really want to go full savant mode, like I'm planning 15 moves ahead, you absolutely can do that. We have built that into the game. All right, specific card types. There are 4 different card types in this game. The most common, and the one that you'll be using most often to damage your opponent, is a creature card. Creatures remain in play. They have a fight value on the right, a life value on the left. Creatures deal damage to each other based on their fight value. They can take damage equal to their life value. Damage in this game is permanent. If a creature hits another creature and deals damage, that damage will stay. We have wound markers to indicate that.
Okay.
Now, the reason why the damage is permanent is that creatures deal damage to players' life stacks and discard stacks based on their current life. So if you start chipping down a bigger creature, it will deal less and less damage to you as it loses life. Creatures exhaust to attack. You can't say tap, that's copyrighted. And then they refresh to come back to be able to be used again. Next up, fortifications. Fortifications remain in play. They generally give you an ongoing benefit that's beneficial or do something that helps you. Fortifications are limited by location, which you can see on the middle right there. North, south, east, and west, points of the compass rose. You can have as many fortifications on a location as you want. Only the topmost fortification is active. Some fortifications interact with other fortifications. For example, we have one called a sand dune and a nomad camp. If you build a nomad camp on top of a sand dune, the nomads it generates now become more powerful. So certain fortifications work together. Third up is intrigues, as evidenced by the intrigue scroll right there. Intrigues are similar to fortifications that they remain in play, give you an ongoing benefit, or do something bad to your opponent. Intrigues have an upkeep cost on the middle left right there. You must pay this upkeep cost at the start of every turn. If you cannot pay the upkeep cost, you must pay as much as possible, then the intrigue exhausts, has no effect that turn. Intrigues are very double-edged swords. If you put too many of these out, your resource base will then become exhausted down, and you won't be able to summon any other cards. Lastly, we have schemes. Schemes are our equivalent of instants. They can be played at any time active effects are allowed. On the little play sheet that comes in the box, you'll see a turn order on the far upper right side of the play sheet that tells you when all the steps of the turn are. So we want people to be able to learn how to play the game very quickly. Schemes, you cast them, they do their effect, they resolve, they go to the discard stack. So you can play them on your turn or on your opponent's turn. The other 3 cards you can only play on your turn during your summoning phase. So players will always have a chance to react to what each other is doing. Mechanics in our game that are different from other games. The trading mechanic, that's how we get resources. So when we get to the trading phase, it's after the draw phase, if it's my turn, I will say, I offer you a tier 1 and a tier 2 for a tier 1 and a tier 2. It is your choice if you want to accept or not. You can make a counter offer. You could say, well, I don't really need a tier 2, I'll trade you a tier 1 for a tier 1. It would then be my choice to accept or not, or continuing haggling back and forth. Whatever you end up agreeing on, those are the cards you have to trade. Trades do not have to be symmetrical. They don't have to be 1-to-1. I could say, I'll offer you a tier 3 for 3 tier 1s. It's up to you if you want to take that trade or not based on the cards you have in your hand and what you're trying to summon. You could also say, I will offer you my entire hand for a ham sandwich. We don't enforce the rules, we just give you the framework. If you want to trade away your hand for a ham sandwich, you're not going to have a lot of resources, but you will have lunch, and it will be delicious.
And if we can't come to terms?
If you can't come to terms, at any time a player can shut down the trade phase by saying no trades. If that happens, there are two options you have. The first one, if the top cards of each person's life stack are the same, you can immediately force those as a one-to-one trade. It'll go face down in their respective aspect stacks. If there is no force trade available, you can seize cards from an opponent's hand. If I want to seize a tier 1 resource from your hand, so that is taking it, putting it down as a resource for me, I have to discard 3 cards to take a tier 1. One of those cards will be removed permanently from the game. 4 cards for a tier 2, 5 cards for a tier 3. So it will cost you hand advantage to take an opponent's card and gain resource advantage. When you gain resources, they always stay face down. You do not know the traps your opponent is trading to you. They don't know the traps that you're trading to them. They'll come into your aspect stack. During the resource phase, you'll then choose one resource in your aspect stack to put into play. It can now generate power for you with which to summon cards. You must put a resource into play. You can only put one resource into play. So kind of like Magic has the 1 land per turn, we have the one resource per turn. Last mechanic in our game that is very unique that I have not seen in any other game is called the sacrifice mechanic. So I am not a big fan of permission decks because permission decks mean one person is playing the game, one person is not playing the game.
Right.
So you do need counterspells, however, because you have to give players a chance to react to what the other person's doing. You have to give them a chance to stop what they're doing. So in our game, there are almost no counterspells. There's really only one, and it only counters like low-level schemes. However, any player at any time can destroy, so remove from the game, any card that is in play or being played by sacrificing resources equivalent to that card's printed casting cost. So you will always have access to a counterspell, but it will always cost you to use it. So once you start getting into more competitive high-level play, knowing when and what to sacrifice against will really determine if you win or lose games.
And that's sacrifice, not just exhaust.
Right, correct? Not just exhaust. It's, okay, if these resources are down and I need to sacrifice to stop something that costs 1 tier 1, 2 tier 2s, and 1 tier 3, all these resources are now removed from the game for me. In return, I have just stopped whatever that was from occurring. So you're giving up part of your power as a god in order to just make this thing not happen. All right, other than that, one other thing we have, your god card. So when you're playing this game, you're actually playing as a god. So the front tells you what your god can do. It's a once per game ability. Most of them are active abilities. Some have passive in addition to their active abilities. When you use your god card, you flip it over, you see the nice shiny artwork on the back. It's beautiful. Artist Clark, he did an amazing job. On the god card and on a lot of other cards, you'll see this little chain symbol. So what that means is conviction. If all the cards you have in play and in your discard stack are the same color as your god, you are considered to be in conviction. You are fully subscribing to your god's philosophy. They are rewarding you with additional power. At any time, if a card that is not your god's color comes into play, then you have lost conviction. Your god is angry. You have betrayed them. You are now negotiating instead of being aggressive. You no longer have conviction. What this means practically is that if you want to create a monocolor deck, so for example, an all red deck, you will get all your conviction bonuses. You'll be very powerful within what the red faction does. You will lose access to the other abilities that the other factions provide. If you go broad, if you pull from all the factions, you'll have lots of options in terms of reacting to different situations, but you won't be as powerful in each specific area as a conviction deck would be. Cool.
Let's jump in and play a couple turns.
All right, sounds good. Okay, so we're about to start a game of Twilight of the Gods. Twilight of the Gods, the way it starts, first check and make sure you have 50 cards in your deck. I've already checked these, you have 50 cards in your deck. Next, you're going to shuffle your deck. So whatever you need to do to shuffle, once, twice, 3 times, whatever, go ahead and make sure those cards are randomized. Okay, so we have now shuffled our decks, randomized them. Starting hand is 7 cards. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We recommend in your starting hand you have at least 2 to 3 tier 1s. If you do not, then you can take 1 full mulligan, which means you would shuffle that back in, shuffle again, and then draw 7.
Yeah. Have 1?
So you only have 1, so you would probably want to take a mulligan on that card. So you would shuffle, draw a new 7. In a competitive environment, you would be stuck with that 7. When playing with your friends, I recommend let them have a decent starting hand so that way you can both play the game. Right, yeah. It's not about you demolishing your friends all the time. It's, let people play the game. There you go, perfect. So now you have 3 tier 1s. And the reason why you want generally 3 or more tier 1s is you're gonna trade a couple away, and then that will leave you 1 or 2 to play. All right, so that's a good starting hand. All right, so I'm gonna go first, so that way I can show you the turn order. So the first phase of the turn is called the refresh phase. So any exhausted aspects, creatures, whatever's you have out will now become fresh and become available to use. No active effects are allowed during the refresh phase. We do not want players messing with each other's resources while they're trying to pay upkeeps for intrigues. Next is the draw phase. Active effects are allowed during the draw phase, both before and after the draw. So you can mess with someone while you're drawing. On the first player's first turn, you draw 1 card. Every turn thereafter, we'll be drawing 2 cards. It puts us on a 21 turn countdown to the end of the game if nothing else happens, because once our deck goes, we are dead. There is no maximum hand size. You draw as many cards as you want, you're just causing damage to yourself. All right, so on first player's first turn, I will draw a card. Next, we move to the trade phase. Since it is my turn, I will be able to propose a trade. Usually for starting trades, we recommend trades be 1-to-1. And the resource base you want to build up is 2 tier 1s, 2 tier 2s, and 1 tier 3. That will allow you to play most of the cards in the starter decks. So I will offer to trade you a tier 1 and a tier 2 for a tier 1 and a tier 2. Now, having been a longtime player of this game and having read all the cards, you know exactly what all your cards do, so you will know, okay, these are the cards I want to trade, these are the cards I want to keep. So yep, tier 1 and tier 2, so we will slide those face down across to each other. We will not look at them. It took us about a month to break that habit during internal playtesting of picking them up and looking at them. So these cards are now in our aspect stacks. They are not yet in play. Cards in the aspect stack cannot be manifested. However, you will eventually put all those into play. So you can't just sit on a trap and then never give your opponent an opportunity to reveal it. They will have a chance at some point. All right, after the trade phase is the seize phase. If we had not traded with each other, I would now have the opportunity to take a resource from your hand by ditching cards from my own hand. 3 for tier 1, 4 for tier 2, 5 for tier 3. If I seize from you, during the next turn, if you seize back from me, you are at a discount of 1 card less. All right, after the seize phase is the resource phase. Here's where I choose a resource to put into play. If you have more than one, you can choose any of the resources you have available. You must put 1 resource into play. You can only put 1 resource into play. I'm going to put my tier 1 resource into play. This is now available to be exhausted to generate power to summon cards. Next up is my summoning phase. Here's where I play cards from my hand. I am going to exhaust my tier 1 to play a Stoic Legionnaires. They're a 2-fight, 1-life creature with initiative. That means they strike first in combat against other creatures. They also have the ability, when you put this card into play, you may manifest a tier 1. Now, I could manifest this tier 1, but since you are the person who traded it to me, I don't know what it is, I probably don't want to do that. Usually you want to manifest on your opponent's side of the field because you know what you've traded to them. You know those traps. Alternatively, if I really wanted to know what this card was, in case it was a trap that maybe I could make use of, I could say, yes, I am going to manifest this and see what it does, but I'm not going to do that. After the summoning phase is the combat phase. Creatures cannot attack the turn they come into play. They have not summoning sickness, they're acclimating to the battlefield. So, however, creatures that have exhaust abilities can use those abilities the turn they come into play. So you can not tap your creature, exhaust your creature the turn they come in. After the combat phase is the end phase. That's where any cards that have been manifested flip back face down, and any other effects that occur during the end phase will now occur, and it is the end of the turn. So now it is your turn. So, refresh phase, you have nothing to refresh. Draw phase, you'll now draw 2 cards. As it is no longer the first player's first turn, they will go into your hand. Now it will be the trade phase. So now you can decide which cards you would like to trade. A 2 and a 3 for a 2 and a 3 would be a decent trade. Okay, so 2 and 3 for 2 and a 3. We'll slide those face down to each other. Now, astute viewers will notice after he's going to put his resource into play, we will each have 3 turns worth of resources to put into play. So we may not trade during the next couple turns. One thing that early players of the game do is they'll generally trade a lot early on, and then they'll have way too many resources, and their opponent will have way too many resources. As you become more familiar with what your deck can do and what you want to do in the game, you'll start figuring out, okay, here's the minimum resource base I need to build up. From there, I'm going to try and react to what my opponent does, or try to convince them to give me more than they should so I can play more powerful cards later on. All right, so that was the trade phase. We skipped the seize phase because we traded. Now you get to choose one of those to put into play. Usually a tier 1 is a good choice. Generally you want to curve out to tier 1, tier 1, tier 2, tier 2, tier 3, and then go from there. Depending on your deck, that may be different, but for beginning players, that's usually a pretty good way to go. Okay, so now if you have any cards in your hand that have 1 tier 1 casting cost, you can play them.
So I don't have a play currently?
Okay, so then you will pass your turn. You'll pass your summoning phase, you'll pass your combat phase, pass your end phase, so now it will be my turn. So we'll do a quick combat with the Stoic Legionnaires to show kind of like the initial round of combat, and then we'll move into a more advanced situation where we'll set up the end game, where Mars is about to deliver Hera a stinging defeat. So I will do refresh, I will draw, I will choose not to trade. Trading and seizing is always optional, you don't have to do it. I will move to my summoning, or my resource phase. I will put a tier 2 into play. I can't summon anything. Actually, I can summon something. Let me explain another mechanic in our game. It's what's called creature limit. You can have as many creatures out of this type as you have resources of that type. So currently in my hand, I have a second Stoic Legionnaires. If I summoned this Stoic Legionnaires, they would hit the field, I would get their manifest effect, but then I would be exceeding my creature limit, so one of these would immediately have to die. This prevents rush decks from overwhelming their opponents really early on in the game. You could still build a rush deck, but you're giving up your bigger resources to do so because you're building up a creature limit on your smaller resources. So I will not play anything. Combat step, I will declare an attack against your life stack with my Stoic Legionnaires. You can declare attacks against either life stack or discard stack. Creatures deal damage to life stack equal to their current life. They deal damage to discard stack equal to their current life halved, rounded up. So they'll always destroy at least one card. When you attack a discard stack, you always choose which cards are destroyed. When you restore from a discard stack, you always randomize what cards are restored. That's to prevent infinite loops of I restore my restore mechanics, I restore my restore mechanics, so on and so forth. So I'm declaring an attack with my Stoic Legionnaires against your life stack. They swing, you have nothing to block. So when cards flip out, they flip out face up. And the reason why is so both players know what cards are no longer in that deck and to determine conviction for your god. So if a blue card flips face up in there, you will have lost conviction. Because conviction isn't just cards on the field, it's also cards in your discard stack. So when you're deck building, you can splash in other colors, but you run the risk if your opponent hits you and flips those cards out, you've now lost conviction in your deck. So let's set up a late game play where Mars can show off some of the high level mechanics of the game, and yeah, go from there.
Sounds good. All right, we bounced forward toward the end of the game, and
Yep.
I'm amazing.
Yes. So Travis is amazing right now. He is Mars. It may look like I have a lot of life left in my deck, but he is about to kill me on this turn, and we're going to show you how, viewers. It's going to be fantastic. So it is currently your turn. We are in your combat phase. You're about to declare an attack. All right. So you are going to declare an attack with your Cataphracts of the Sand. They're a 4-fight, 4-life, tier 3 creature with Overrun. Overrun means if they survive combat, they deal their remaining life and damage to their original target. Cataphracts of the Sand also has an additional ability where the first time they attack, they refresh and then attack again. So they get to attack twice during a turn. So you are declaring an attack with your Cataphracts of the Sand against my life stack. Boom, they're coming in. I get to choose to declare blockers now. So I'm going to choose to declare my Shade of Thanatos as a blocker, because this has 4-fight, 2-life. I don't really care if I lose it as long as it kills your Cataphracts. That's all that's important. I don't want to eat the damage from them. However, you're like, haha, you have fallen into my trap. I'm going to use my once per game deity power of Mars. Active, trigger after defenders are declared. Give one of your attacking creatures initiative until end of turn. Initiative allows them to strike first during combat. So you're going to give your Cataphracts of the Sand initiative. In addition, you have conviction. Oh, you don't have conviction. Never mind. You have a blue card in play. You have lost conviction. Sorry. Mars he has forsaken you. All right, so your Cataphracts of the Sand have conviction. That means they're going to strike first against the Shade of Thanatos. They will deal 4 damage to the Shade, greater than the Shade's 2 hit points. The Shade dies. Because they have Overrun, they now deal their remaining life and damage to the original target, which is my life stack. They deal 4 damage. 1, 2, 3, 4. Boom, 4 more cards flip off into my discard stack. The Cataphracts then refresh, must take their second attack. I could block with my second Shade, but what would be the point? It's going to deal 4 damage anyways. They still have initiative. I'm not going to block. Mars is flipped over now too because he's all shiny. He's like, I want to win this thing. All right, Cataphracts hit in again. I take 4 more damage. 1, 2, 3, 4. Boom. Oh no, I still have a bunch of life left. However, you know what tier 3 you traded me early on in the game. You're like, this is just all part of the plan.
I'm very crafty.
Very crafty. So you need to find a way to manifest this tier 3. Now your card, Assyrian Sphinx, has conviction, Deathbound. Deathbound means when it goes from the combat field to the discard stack, you get to do whatever it says afterwards. Deathbound manifest 1 tier 3. So you need to find a way to kill this thing and also to get this out of the game. Good thing we have the sacrifice mechanic. You're going to sacrifice a tier 1, so this is gone from the game. To destroy this is now gone from the game. Boom. You are now in conviction. All the cards in your discard stack are red. All the cards on your field are red. You now have conviction. Now you need to find a way to kill the Assyrian Sphinx. Well, creature limit, if you didn't have any tier 2s anymore, you would not be able to support a tier 2 creature. So you're going to sacrifice 1 tier 1 and 2 tier 2s to destroy my Shade of Thanatos. Boom, those go out of the game. Shade of Thanatos goes out of the game. Because you no longer have creature limit to support your Assyrian Sphinx, he's going to boom, hit there. He is going to manifest the tier 3, which is Total War. Total War does 6 damage to all players and then 2 damage to yourself. That is going to deal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 damage to me. I am instantly dead. You don't have to take that 2 damage.
Perfect.
You win the game. Congratulations. You are fantastic at Twilight of the Gods.
All right. That was Twilight of the Gods. If you guys are Johnny players, this game is going to be right up your alley. If you like other trading card games, there's going to be something in here you like. Keep an eye on TechRaptor.net for more.